speaking, could they put themselves on mute? And if they do wish to speak, to raise their hand, and I will do my best to ensure that I catch everybody. But please bear with me and keep waving if I've missed you as we go. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Convener, we have apologies from Karen Prochek and from Holly Anderson. Thank
you. Do we have any declarations of interest at this time? Any member wish to declare an interest? No. Okay, that takes us to the minute of the meeting of the 8th of December, pages 3 to 8 on the papers. Are we content that's a true minute?
Agreed.
Thank you. Is there anything that's not on the agenda that MD would wish to raise?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, thank you. Move to item 4, which is the rolling action log. And it has been updated. I don't know if there's anything additional that officers would wish to add. Or Robert, is there anything you want to add to the rolling action log by way of information at this stage?
Just Convener, that the rolling action log makes reference to the issue of the school holiday dates, and we haven't been able to make any progress with Clickmannon and Stirling. Their position is that they will stick with the holiday dates as previously agreed. So my suggestion would be that that is removed from the rolling action log, as I don't see any prospect of there being a change to that position.
Okay, thank you. Are members content and agreeable to that? Councillor Nimmo?
Thanks, Convener. I did have that item as an item just for further information from officers, but I'm quite happy to take that off my list here. I have a number of other points here relating to the action log as well. ID number 481, can we just confirm when in 2021 this report is going to be coming to us? There's no date attached to it in the paperwork. I'm just wondering when we can expect it.
Okay. Robert?
Gary's going to give you the updated position from the government on that.
Okay, thanks, Convener. Councillor Nimmo, we're planning to bring a report into the June executive to give an update on the DSM. Members will recall the government have allowed a year's extension because of COVID-related challenge to the introduction of the DSM, so it's now been delayed to nationally to 2022. So we'll bring a paper in June that outlines our position on it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gary. The next point is number 483. Now, there's obviously nothing on the agenda here today, but we're supposed to get an update report twice a year. I'm just wondering when we can expect the next one.
There'll be a report on the Regional Improvement Collaborative progress in March, so the next committee.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Second last point, number 489. Is there any revised timescales in relation to this? Obviously, there's been big implications with COVID, but I'm just wondering if the timescales have been revised.
Gary?
Thanks, Convener. Just to say, Councillor Nimmo, that we're currently looking at this just now. We are planning to perhaps, there's a report going to come to the March committee around the CLD action plan as well for 484 for information, but we're looking at this just now, and hopefully we'll be able to give an update or a report to the next meeting in March.
Okay, thanks, Gary. My last one is number 521. Just when can we expect an update in relation to this? It's in relation to the motion in the school transport.
I can give an update on that again, Councillor Nimmo, and apologies. The response to this was contained, unfortunately, in the March committee report of last year, but the committee the executive never took place because of the lockdown position. So what we'll do is we will include that response in the March 21 committee. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other member in relation to the action log?
Yes.
Michael Rollo.
Just a couple of things. I noticed a couple of spelling mistakes. Under 530, we have capshal instead of capital. And under 536, dependent instead of dependent. Just if you want to change that. Small things. It proves that I read it anyway.
Absolutely, Michael.
Maybe get a prize for spelling afterwards. It's education.
Thank you for that. Councillor Reid? All right, okay, right, thank you. Okay, any other member? No? Okay, we will move on to the agenda item 5, which is the Early Learning and Childcare 1140 Expansion Plan, which is a standard item. And Mr Greenhorn, you're going to take this?
Thank you, convener. I'm really pleased, hopefully, to bring another positive report to the executive this morning. 4 purposes, the report outlined in section 1.1. There's 6 recommendations before the executive today. 3 recommendations are to note, and there's 3 recommendations today that are for agreement. In terms of the background information contained in section 3, the key point there is the Scottish Government have now confirmed the revised statutory implementation date for 1140 as being August of 2021. What we say to members is obviously that is still dependent on the COVID situation at the time, but nonetheless officers are working to make sure that we have got everything in place for that date just now. Section 4, a number of positive considerations to bring to members' attention today. 4.1, it confirms at the time of writing the report there was 4 projects that were nearing completion. For members' information, St Francis is now open, and there's been a slight delay, I'd have to say, in Lauriston, but the work will be completed next month. And the work is also on track for St Margaret's and Nethermain. So we're hoping that at the end of next month, those 4 projects the 3 projects will be completed, and that will increase the number of children that are getting access to 1140 hours. In summary, there's 21 projects that remain outstanding. Appendix 1 contains full details of these projects, and just for members' information, 6 of these projects are minor works, and they're mainly aligned to external landscaping works, which unfortunately the good Scottish weather prevents us doing that, so we're planning to do that around the Easter period. So there's 6 minor areas of work, and there's 15 projects that remain to be completed. 4.2, again, as we mentioned to the executive last month, that I'm pleased to say that Falkirk has been accepted now as one of the 5 pilot authorities within Scotland to take forward the government's plans to introduce the statutory requirement to allow parents to defer a year from August of 2023. I can confirm that additional funding will be forthcoming for this project. Unfortunately, at this point in time, I can't confirm the amount. It's still subject to ratification by Causeless Settlement and Distribution Group. I hope to be able to confirm that at the next update report. Section 4.3, officers went through the usual consultation process with local members, parents and the staff around the renaming of 3 new early learning and childcare centres, and I'm pleased to say that the ones that have fallen to they've sort of risen to the top of the tree in terms of the favourite proposals are named there, and as Murray Oxtings should be proposed to be Abbots Grange, Madison Primary School should be Glendevon ELCC, and St Margaret's Primary School, the proposed ELCC name is Park Hill. So that's one of the proposals that are put forward for agreement by the executive today. Section 4.4, as members recall, very much supporting an early intervention strategy. This section 4.4 outlines the very first part.
Thank you very much.
It completes some of the work around our strategic approach to early intervention. And the proposals before the members today really draw on the successful approach in learning that's taken from all of our experiences so far. Our 13 ELCCs have proven that well-trained and well-motivated SFLAs can provide crucial support to children and also help support other professional groups in the assessment, identification and ongoing support of children's needs. This is at the heart of early intervention, and it's the first stage of a number of stages that we'll bring into members, allied to also the work around the integration of the wider family support teams, and also looking at the furtheration of the paper that David brought before members around the mental health and wellbeing. This is almost like a triangulation of all these reports. This is the first stage. What's before members today is a proposal that really looks at the lessons we've learned from the 13 ELCCs, and we've looked at the staffing structures around them that have given those slightly more resources in terms of SFLAs to support the professional sector and engage with them as well. This proposal looks at increasing the resources within our 39 nursery classes. Effectively, under the Devolve School Management resources now, we have 530 hours per week of SFLA resource. To align it to the 13 ELCCs, the proposal before members today is that we add 370 additional hours to bring the total number of weekly hours to 900 hours. This is aligned to the capacity registration, so effectively it's linked to the size of the nursery class, and we feel that this is a really positive step forward to provide additional support to our young people in these establishments, very much aligned to the good work and outcomes that we're achieving in our ELCC just now. So again, this is an iteration of us reflecting what works well and then try to progress it. The cost of this, of a full year cost, is £560,000, and these costs were already built into the financial budget and planning that we had. Section 4.5 asks a executive for approval to recruit a further support officer to our central team. This is very much aligned to Falkirk being selected as a deferred pilot authority, and the post that's proposed would be funded from the money that we would get, and it would be forthcoming from the Scottish Government. This is critical because what we're seeing just now is that in terms of the eligibility criteria for eligible twos, given the significant COVID financial insecurity pressures that many families are facing, there is a rise in eligible two numbers coming through the system, and we expect eligible two numbers to increase. So we see this post really expansion in the team, also to help support families with the choice around whether or not to defer a year or not. A lot of families look to us to give guidance and advice, and also the school staff as well. So this central post, see it very, very much, it gives us extra flexibility to engage with families, to make sure they understand the pros and cons of what they're doing, and to make sure they make an informed decision. And also it will provide a bit of extra support within the team to allow the team to focus on supporting the families with the increased rise in the eligible two demands across the system. In terms of the implications, the financial resource summary has been updated to reflect the position probably at the start of January, and as we're going to move to the end of the financial year, a more detailed and final position will be reported to the March executive. In terms of the other implications, the legal risk and quality, sustainability and environmental impact, there's no real change since the position we last reported to the executive last year. I'm happy to take any questions on any points, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gary. And again, a very positive update report. I'll go to Councillor McHugh.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much, Mr. Greenhorn, for that report. And as always, you put lots of information in there, so everyone is very clear on the way forward. I would like to draw your attention to 4.4, just as Gary explained there, that I think over the last couple of years, we have developed the infrastructure of the ELC provision across Falkirk. If it hadn't been for obviously the pandemic that we're in, we would have been completed and up and running in every centre. And I really want to thank the whole team for pushing forward under these circumstances. But even more focusing on what the provision is for our children at the very earliest times in their lives, coming into environments, you know, out with the home. And I think the 4.4 highlights the fact that we are focused on early intervention, that I think SFLA, Sport for Learning provision being extended is a very good move forward. I think the teams within our early learning centres have grown, as you can see over the different reports that we've had come through. The staff teams have grew and grew. We've brought in different professionals at different levels. And I think now we're at the stage where we need to draw these teams together and really look at the whole holistic approach to our children and our families' support and development. So I welcome this report and I move it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I'll now go to Councillor Alexander.
Happy to move the
Second.
second the report and reserve the right to come back later on in the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. I'll just open it up now for questions or comments. Maureen? Maureen, you're still muted.
Sorry, I'm thinking maybe that was a good thing. Part of my remit in school was working with children who had additional support needs and also families. And things are so much better and productive when families and schools and children work together. And I really welcome the idea that children don't suddenly develop these needs when they start nursery. They're there beforehand, and I think it might be a sort of a small scale intervention from the nursery staff, which will help parents and support parents as well, because it's not only the children that need it, but the parents. And I'm really glad to see that it's a team effort at a very early age. You know, it could be small scale and things are sorted, you know, before the major things start. But I really think it's brilliant idea and working together as teams. And I'm glad there's extra staff too, Gary. That's me. Sorry.
Thank you, Maureen, for the comments. Councillor Harris.
Thanks, Convener. Another very comprehensive report from Gary, as we come to expect. Gary, I'd like to look at the projects which have yet be completed, and obviously one which in my own ward. It gives me a little bit of concern, the Denny Primary School, that's on page 21. We're looking at an indicative cost in excess of £500,000 or up to £500,000 with no estimated date of start for this. Have you got any update on the tendering process on the Denny School and an idea of whether it looks as if that's going to come in on budget?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harris. And again, it's a very pertinent question, and it probably refers to a number of projects. Unfortunately, we had expected a number of tenders to come in mid to the end of January, but some of the contractors have reported slight delays in getting their own tenders from subcontractors. So some of the tenders have been delayed for a period of up to 2 weeks. I'm hoping that the March committee report brings to fruition a number of tenders that are just out there waiting to be received and opened and assessed by us, Councillor Harris. In terms of the expectation on the cost versus the budget, again, we hope, because there are a number of COVID-related issues, but certainly working with, we've revised the project plans, and also we gave a report to the emergency executive back in September about this particular project as well. So certainly we're fairly comfortable that we'll be able to get the tender within the budget that we've got, and we can report that successfully to this executive in March.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Any other member, any questions or comment? I've got Councillor Nimble, then Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of quick questions. It's great that we were selected as one of the pilot authorities, but I'm just wondering what was the criteria that was used in the selection process, and who are the other local authorities that are taking part in this? That's my first question.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Nimmo, for the question. Unfortunately, I can't say what the criteria that was used because I don't work for the government. All we were asked to do was to put our name forward, and they've assessed it themselves. So unfortunately, I can't answer that. What I can answer is I can answer the other four authorities. The Angus Council, Argyll and Bute, Borders and Shetland. So Falkirk is the biggest council out of the 5 pilot authorities that have been successfully accepted as within the pilot.
Okay, thanks for that, Gary. My next point relates to something that Nigel touched on there, and it's regarding the tenders and the costs involved. Do we have any indication yet as to what the impact of COVID is likely to be on the tender costs? Because I can see them rising significantly. And in view of that, if that is what happens, will the Scottish Government underwrite any additional costs with it being ring-fence money?
Okay, and again, it's a very timely question, Councillor Nimmo. What we say is that we'll be able to answer that question probably more fully in the March paper, because we've got a number of key tenders that are due in, and we've also got a number of projects that are put under various framework agreements. So we'll be able to sit and assess that. I had hoped to be able to give you a bit further information, but again, because the tender process, development services have allowed, as they're likely to do, a 2-week extension in some cases to get the tenders in. So hopefully the March report will bring to fruition, I think, that very point. I think it was also the point that Councillor Bissett has raised in the past as well, and we'll be able to look at it. What I can say is that members will recall, however, that you had agreed, because of these risks, to allocate an element of revenue to a capital to indemnify and to protect herself once we identified that risk under what they call a CFCR, a capital from current revenue adjustment. So we have got a bit of extra cash in the capital pot that would allow us to deal with reasonable cost increases, I would have to say. But again, when we get to the March report, it'll be the end of the financial year, and I hope to give a more fuller picture. What I can say is I'm fairly confident just now within the quantum of resources, both capital and revenue, that we've got, that we can deliver this project within budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. As always, I would like to thank Gary for a very comprehensive report. And I think it's a report that I don't think there's anyone in the executive would say isn't a positive report. It's one of these, that cross-party, everybody agrees it's a way forward. And certainly welcome the early intervention where any issues can be picked up at an early stage rather than kids progressing forward and them being picked up. So that kind of family intervention, the picking up any health matters is really to be welcomed. So we accept the recommendations, and the only thing I would want to ask is, regarding education in the future and people and kids' progression, and maybe how the early learning effects might affect the attainment gap, and will we be collating that information and bringing forward something maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the line to see if the early learning and childcare is actually improving the attainment gap. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. I think it's a fair point you've raised with regard to the attainment gap and the interventions that are there, and I'm not sure that that's something that's going to be easily answered or quickly answered, but I'll ask Robert Naylor if he's got any comment he'd want to make on that at this time. But I think obviously that the evidence will need to flow through following the interventions that have initially been put in place. But Robert?
Thanks, Convener. Just to say that there are already some signs of the attainment gap closing. The report that came before the committee I think in December, was charting that our school leaver destination gap was closing, and also in terms of our curriculum for excellence levels at the early stages and at level 1, level 2 in primary schools, we've got evidence that the gap is beginning to close. It will always be difficult in the short term to say just exactly what is responsible for that, whether it's changes in practice, whether it's the impact of pupil equity fund. There's so much activity and so much focus and rigour in terms of closing the attainment gap from a variety of different angles. However, I think it would be fair to say that we will closely monitor the impact of children having 1140 hours with all the supports that we have been describing in various committee reports. All of this is designed to have a better transition into the early stages of primary school, to make sure that children are better prepared to start school learning. And I think probably over the course of 3 to 5 years, we ought to be able to demonstrate that the outcomes for children at the earliest stages are better than they have been. And this actually links into a report later on the agenda in terms of Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow, where, as members know, we've got early years linking into primary. We're looking at the way in which we transform the way that primary learning operates, and then into the secondary phase. So all of these various aspects link together. But Councillor Bissett, I would imagine that what we'll be able to demonstrate, maybe not just in Falkirk, but maybe nationally over a number of years, is that there has been a significant impact by making the investment in early years provision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
I think Mr.
I was only going to ask a question. It has already been asked by Councillor Nimmo, really in relation to the COVID expenses, how much that would be inflated onto a price, because I'd heard some people in construction saying that some of the costs had gone up by as much as 30%. So I was just wondering that, but it's already been asked and it's already been answered. So thank you, and also Gary, good report. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Like everybody else, once again, a comprehensive report by Gary. I don't know if this will be for you, Gary, or be for Robert or David Mackay. On page 17, 4.5, where we really support this new deferred place scheme. I'm glad that Falkirk was chosen for it. I was asked a question this week. If a child goes in when he's 4.5 to school and the parents don't think that he's progressing, can he be kept back a year into primary 1 again? Does that cover in this, or is this just for before they start school? Cheers, Robert.
Okay, Robert.
This is about before children start school, and in particular the case that you talk about, the child who potentially could go to school when they're 4.5 rather than being 5. And there's always been a procedure around looking at that, and what the Deferred Places scheme will bring to the fore is probably a much more powerful position for parents who, if they are of the view that their children are not ready to start school, then it will be much easier for them to say that they're not going to start school, and they will start school the following year with an additional period of time spent in early years rather than going into school when they're not ready. It's been a long time since the concept of repeating a year in any of the primary stages was the case. I think perhaps when I was a child, I was conscious that some children that happened, but to the best of my knowledge, this doesn't happen anywhere in Scotland any longer, in part because of the early years provision that has grown over the last couple of decades. And this current expansion of early years, both the additional hours in year and now the option to defer entry, ought to mean that we are in a much better place so that every child that starts primary one is in a position where they're ready to learn from the off. So that's the purpose of the new proposal about deferred entry.
Thanks, Robert. And I can relay that back to my constituent. The second question I've got is for Gary, and it's in page 20. Just for the Kinneil Primary School, a new kitchen is costing over 250,000. Is that a building got to be built as well, or is that just a kitchen, Gary? That's a lot of money. I've just done a kitchen. That's a lot of money for a kitchen.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Kerr, the reference here was to the overall project. The bit of the project that's outstanding is the kitchen just now, and we're waiting for the work to start. The tender for that has been awarded, so it's looking at the overall cost of that overall project. There was other work that was getting done in the school. The kitchen is the last remaining part that would bring that project to completion.
Thanks, Gary. I just thought it was gold taps we were putting in Bowness schools. Eh?
Okay,
Thanks, Katrina.
thanks, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Alexander.
Thanks very much, Convener. The couple of questions have arisen during the discussion. First being criteria for the government scheme. We'll put it close to the chest, but my experience in the past is that we'll always have 2 out of 5 they know that are delivering an excellent service and are innovative and entrepreneurial. And I think Falkirk fits that particular description. And one of the reasons I think the Falkirk fits that prescription is I think that, and I think everyone can take a bit of credit for this committee doesn't talk education down the way it's talked down in other forums. This committee has generally talked education up, and I think we're seeing some benefits from that. I'm particularly pleased to see on a local basis, and I'll be parochial just for a minute, the progress that's been made in the Arthur Woodburn Day Nursery. It's a very important facility within that particular community, and we know how much it's appreciated by the staff. So good to see that, and the pupils and their parents, or young people and their parents. We've seen some false dawns, not through any fault of our own, but the work has commenced in that particular site, and I'm particularly happy about that one. Thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone that I've missed? No. Okay, I'll go to Councillor McHugh to sum up.
Just in my summary, Convener, I welcome Councillor Kerr's question, because that definitely highlights exactly what we're seeing in this report, that we need to iron out any issue or problem before the child moves into formal primary school, because it is so much more difficult once they move into education. And if we can put in early intervention robustly to ensure that our children are ready and prepared and excited about moving into school, and the families are reassured and confident that their child will do well in school, then that's us doing a really good job. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McHugh. Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We move on to item 6, which is a proposed consultation on the permanent closure of Limerick Bothkennet primary schools. And I think it's Mr. Greenhorn as well.
It is indeed. Thank you, Convener. The purpose of the report is outlined in section 1.1 and would draw to members' attention that the proposal here isn't to close the schools. The proposal here is to go out and conduct a statutory consultation on the proposed closure. There's two recommendations outlined in section 2 before the executive today. Section 3 sets out the timeline for the project. It looks at the commitment that was given in terms of mothball, and it gives a current status update to the project. Section 3.2 for members' info outlines the reasons why we agreed to the mothballing of these two schools a few years back. The considerations set out in section 4, same considerations apply to both schools. For members' information, the three key questions that we ask ourselves here is the primary aged catchment children, are they going to increase in the next 5 years? From the Forth Valley Health Board data, does that show us any increase in the primary aged children? And based on the data overall, is there anything the officers would suggest that would show a catchment demand increasing that would justify the reopening of either of these schools? And I would have to say, based on the information that's in section 4, the answer is no to those questions. The section 4.3, one of the challenges we do have here is COVID related. The statutory consultation at the moment under the 2010 Act requires that we conduct a public meeting. And we're already in discussions with Education Scotland as to how we would take that forward, because they provide an important and integral and independent part of overseeing the process here. So part of the consultation agreement is that we have set a date and a time and a place for a public meeting, but also what we've done is we've made sure that if we're not able to do it because of the COVID restrictions at the time, that we would revert to a virtual public meeting. And because of that, what I would say is that within the paper, we've been a bit flexible and proactive. Rather than stick to the statutory consultation of 30 term days, we've extended the consultation period to a period of 8 weeks. That allows us to create a bit of flexibility if any of the COVID restrictions in any way would restrict the public's access to a consultation or restrict the public for feeling that they want to contribute to this consultation. So again, we've tried to extend the period to allow for that. Very important point outlined in section 4.4, that the strategic property review, both of these proposals were already hardwired and aligned within the aims and ambitions of the strategic property review already. 4.5 poses a classic what-if scenario. The what-if scenario here is around that it would be wrong for us not to bring to members' attention that in September 19, the Council did outline planning permission in principle for the development of 90 houses in the Limerick area. Since then, and at the current date, there's no indication of any start date of when those houses would start, and there's no indication equally of when those houses or the 90 houses would come to be completed. What we can say is that if those came to fruition and 90 houses were built, from our current data and analytical information, we would normally project 25 to 30 pupils being generated from those houses. So although at this point in time, these houses, there is no indication of when they were built, the question is, what if? An officer's opinion is that even if the decision was made to close the school following the consultation and those houses came to fruition, then the current Slamanan Primary School is adequately equipped with the proper capacity to cope with that demand. Being proactive, we've also made sure that the Section 75 agreement, which is a developer contribution to support infrastructure and capacity expansion linked to the development houses, makes sure that that money isn't linked to one school, it's linked to any school. So if it came to fruition, we could use that money to alter Slamanan Primary School if it was needed. Section 5 outlines the various component and key elements of the statutory consultation process. The consultation period itself, the publicity around it, and the intention that we would be doing a wider leaflet drop to the wider community, and it gives the dates and the times for the public meeting. The proposed documents are in Appendix 1, and there's a proposal document for both schools. The statutory consultees are also outlined in that section, and probably the most important part, and this is the part where many authorities have failed to hit the mark in terms of their aims and ambitions when it comes to school closures, is the education benefit statement. And I'm going to pause here and ask my colleague, Mr. Mackay, to provide a brief reminder to members of what the benefits would be in terms of the proposal document itself. David.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary. Committee may remember that when we initially brought the proposal to mothball both schools, we outlined the educational benefit statement. So the statement contained within these documents then really just further expands on the rationale that we explored during the previous. It sets out kind of 10 expectations within Falkirk schools in terms of what we would expect our schools to be able to provide to local communities. It really highlights the challenges that when rolls fall to particularly low numbers, then the quality of the educational experience for those children becomes much diminished from that of their peers in larger schools and establishments, mainly due to the fact that they do not have large peer groups to operate within, and it then reduces the flexibility that the class teachers thereafter have in terms of the variety of learning approaches that they can adopt within the classroom environment. It also significantly reduces their ability to create programmes of leadership within the school and to engage in programmes of physical activity and games and sports within the schools as well. Further impacts can be related to attendance when the rolls are particularly low, as they are in both of these schools, that any one absence then has a significant impact on the composition of any learning groups that are created within those establishments. It also has a significant lack of diversity and impact on the completion rate of work, etc., and actually provides some challenge as well. The educational benefit statements also references sometimes a perception from parents and families that small is better, and there's actually a significant body of research that actually says small brings significant educational challenges in terms of the opportunity to engage in conversations, to be supportive of your peers with their learning experience within the classroom environment, and also the diversity of the opportunity that it also provides there. So the educational benefit statement is, I feel, fairly comprehensive there and highlights a number of key points that we feel applies to both Limering Primary School and Birkenhead Primary School's current situation. And again, as Gary indicated, we've got the capacity within the local schools to ensure that those children have adequate and effective educational provision going forward that overcomes all of the challenges outlined in the statement. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, David. Again, the remiss of us not to just advise the executive in section 5.8, and these are rural school closures, and as such, the rural school closures poses probably wider questions as we go through this statutory consultation. And the two factors that have got to be considered is the likely impact in the wider community, and one of the other key thing which the proposal documents do address, and we will address as we go through the consultation if it's agreed, is looking at the change in travel arrangement and the impact it has on the children. What we say to that is those alternative travel arrangements are already in place. I would also take the chance to remind members that at the previous consultation around the balling, there was 2 written responses that were made to it, and both written responses, one for either school, were of a positive nature. In terms of the further documents, it outlines the involvement of Education Scotland. We've already given them advance warning of this if it was proposed, and it also gives a timeline and reporting back to this executive, and also gives a timeline for reporting to Scottish ministers, because of school closures have got to be notified, and there's a timeline that follows that as well. In terms of the financial and resource allocation, there's a detailed summary in Appendix 2, and I would take the chance just to say that the summary in Appendix 2 is the COSLA recommended template that was developed several years ago when the whole question of school closures were and authorities taking different tacks on it was raised. So we've applied exactly the recommended template that COSLA and the Scottish Government say we should use. So that's included as well. Happy to take any questions, Convener. Thank you for listening.
Thank you to Gary and Dave for that, and it's a very comprehensive explanation of where we are. But I'll go to Councillor McHugh to speak to the report.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Gary and David. As the convener's already alluded to, it was a full report explaining the whole situation we are in. 2 years ago, we did agree to mothball these two schools. We're now into the formal requirements moving forward, and I've got nothing really else to add other than I welcome the public consultation. I move the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh, and Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I'm happy to formally second and reserve the right to come back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll open up for any questions or comments from members. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, convener. 4.3 statutory consultation. How do we propose to do this and try to cover as many people as possible? Is this all going to be done online? How are we going to do that? And if the closure is agreed, what happens to the building? Does it get the bulldozer, or is it open to community groups to try and do something with it, or open to someone to maybe do something with it? That's basically all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bissett. 2 questions you've asked there. The first question is about the consultation itself. Again, we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic, so we need to make sure that we try our best to use a variety of consultation options. They're detailed in the proposal document, and so too is the statutory consultees. I think the fact that we are planning to letter every household in both school catchment areas is an indication of how serious we're taking the statutory requirement, particularly insofar as it affects rural schools. The usual notices will be placed in all the local publications, and all the parents that we know in terms of all the current Bean Cross and Slamanan School parents will all be lettered around this as well. So we're trying our best to make sure we embrace technology, and also we embrace the formal letters as well, to try to encapture the views of both these communities. The second part to your question, Councillor Bissett, is pertinent. If indeed we wanted to propose and move to a formal closure, as an authority we would bring a report here to do that. Then it is deemed to be surplus to education or children's services requirements, and it would then pass, that asset would pass to the strategic property review insofar as the council asset team to consider the wider implications and ramifications for the property thereafter. Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? Is it being used for anything at the minute? I'm sure I saw somewhere in the report that it was being used for something, or is it just totally shut at the minute? Thank you.
No, Councillor Bissett, you're absolutely spot on. The Limerick School is not being used for anything just now, but the Bothkenna School was being used initially as to support the children's service and the wider council response to the pandemic, and a number of to maintain social distancing. A number of the staff that were moved out of Camlin Education Centre when there was were doing electrical work there were located in Bothkenna for a period of time. So certainly there is equipment in there that was used for office-based staff, but because we're all home working or we're using other properties, it's not really been used so much now. It was used as a one-off to allow us to address the problems and challenges that we had at Camlin Education Centre at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. I've got Councillor Munro, then Councillor Nimmo.
Thank you, convener. Clearly, these schools have already been closed for a period of a couple of years, and looking at the financial considerations, it seems that since most of the major costs no longer exist, that the saving will be quite small. But in Appendix 2, it talks about revenue costs arriving from capital of 34,000. And at the end, it says non-recurring revenue costs minus GAE reduction net saving if school is closed. I wonder if somebody could explain exactly what that means, please.
Okay, I'll do my best, Councillor Munro. What the financial template is trying to do is trying to say what was the annual property costs that were incurred when the building was last open, and what element of them is transferred over to the school where the pupils have moved to. Also looking at where additional costs have been incurred, for example, transport costs have been incurred, and effectively it's trying to net off the two. So it's netting off the two in terms of a council sense, and the last part you raised was the impact on GAE. And without trying to get into the details, the financial details of GAE, but basically what it's saying is that the Scottish Government give increased funding for rural schools. A rural school, by definition, in GAE is a school with a roll of under 70. So effectively, if you're going to close a school with a roll of under 70 and you're moving the pupils to a school where the roll is more than 70, then there's a slight impact on GAE. And Finance have independently assessed this, and indeed Finance have independently prepared these financial statements for us. And the knock-on effect, I think the one you mentioned, I think it was Limerick, the knock-on effect would be that we would lose roughly 15,000 a year through our GAE settlements. It's only right that we bring that to members' attention and we report it. And indeed, that was one of the failures in some councils to recognise the impact in GAE, which is why this template was created by COSLA to make sure that every eventuality was considered in the financial assessment of any such closure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of points, Gary. Obviously, both of these schools, there was a decision taken back in August 2019 to close them. So they've been closed for roughly about a year and a half. You reiterated yet again that Limerick is closed and not used for anything. I've been informed that we're still sending cleaners into the building. Why are we doing that if it's not being used? It's just a false economy in that case.
Councillor, just to say that although the schools are closed, we've still got a statutory duty to make sure that they remain operational. Just for example, should we need to reopen them? So what we don't want to do is to make sure that if the decision was to reopen them, the schools would be the condition would have deteriorated so much that it would have to incur significant costs. So what I can say is it's not the normal cleaning that was going in, but certainly there would be in the same way that building inspectors would go up to check it and electrical staff would go up to check it, the building cleaners go to make sure that the inside of the school is up to a reasonable standard. So we've got to make sure these buildings remain wind and water tight and reasonably in a reasonable operational condition should we need to reopen them. Obviously, if the decision was to close them, then that would backtrack to exactly the position that you outlined. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Thanks for clarifying that. My next point relates to the non-statutory consultation that was undertaken. Now, obviously, there was only one respondent for each school. In your view, does it make sense to go down this road of the non-statutory consultation? Why don't we just go straight to the statutory consultation and take the public's views on board then, and then a decision can be made as to whether they're permanently closed or not?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Nimmo. It's a really interesting question. Probably members will recall that I think the challenge here was that because these schools were both rural schools, and at the time we were considering it, the school closure review panel were meeting to discuss a number of rural school closures, and there was a number of issues reported nationally with legal challenges and things like that. We felt that as we hadn't embarked on any school closure or any rural school closure before, that we felt it was a halfway house, a hybrid model to look at the potential for mothballing, and some other councils opted to go down that route. But again, at the moment, that mothballing option has been removed because the decision we took at the last executive was to defer it to be an integral part of the SPR. So it may well be that our future progression towards this doesn't involve that hybrid mothballing state, but again, that would be dependent on the outcome of the SPR in that regard. But something that we would give consideration to, and obviously it would have to come back to members to approve any steps in the progression of any consideration of a school closure.
Thanks very much for that, Gary. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I'd like to thank Gary for the report once again. Obviously, one of the schools, Linebrigg Primary School, is one of my ward, and it's hard for the mothball or close a school when it's in your area. But that school will be over 100-year-old, and the people who built it couldn't be thinking about Linebrigg village, because it's as close to Evenbrigg as it is to Linebrigg. So it's right out the road even where the Skinflat School's in the heart of the village. The decision that we made 18 months ago was the right decision, and I hope that once we get the consultation done, that we can come to the right decision once again, convener. And I welcome the report for Gary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I've got John and then Maureen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just want to put a sort of education slant onto it, just to say that I think has already been said that working in the small schools, it seems as if it's got a sort of the idea that it's much better for the kids and things like that. It certainly isn't in a lot of cases. They miss out on a lot of opportunities sometimes. They don't get to mix with as many peers and things like that. I think it's already been mentioned. So although these schools have often been in the heart of their community, and it's very difficult to close schools in the heart of a community, I think the benefit that some of the kids get when they go to slightly larger schools, and they're not huge schools that they've moved to, and the bigger scale of things, it does help them to move through education, gets them ready for going to high school and moving on from there as well. So I do think that although we're taken out of the heart of communities, I do think the benefit for the children and the education is definitely there. And it definitely helps staff members as well, because if they're working in a slightly bigger team, sometimes you can feel a little bit isolated as a staff member when you're in the smaller schools and you're only got a very small team. Working in a slightly larger team, it does help the teachers progress and move on and things like that. So just to put that point across, thank you.
Thank you, John. That's been really helpful to have heard that from you. Maureen.
Right. Thank you, Councillor. I thought Councillor Chalmers has stolen my thunder there, because I was what he was saying. I totally agree with. I would just like to comment on the proposal document. I think the choice and use of language that was used in that is easily read. You know, sometimes educationalists tend to use the jargon associated with what they're talking about, you know, and all these, I think it's Councillor Bissett that talks about all these acronyms and everything, you know, but I think the proposal document sets things out really clearly for children. What I would maybe ask the education team to think about is the children's opinions. They've had 2 years now in a bigger school, and it might be worthwhile just to ask them how they found it, and you know, take on board any comments they've got to make, just so that we can pacify a lot more wider audience about the benefits of it. Yep, that's me. Thank you, convener.
Thanks, Maureen. That's a good point. And I'll just go to Gary or David to ask about how we're going to engage with the children and maybe capture their experience of moving from a smaller school to a slightly larger school.
Yeah. Thanks, convener. I would actually just agree with what Maureen has said. I mean, as part of any activity that we engage with our young people in those discussions, because it's very important to get a sense of their understanding of what the situation is, and actually for us to learn from their experiences. So it's something that schools do regularly, and I know that the teachers and the head teacher of Sliman have been in regular contact, similarly within Bean Cross, with the young people to ensure that they settled well and they are making progress, they've made friends, etc. So that's kept under constant review, but I think it's a very valid point, and it would actually enrich the consultation process in terms of actually the voice of the children coming to the wider consultation when it does happen.
Thanks, David. Gary?
Convener, just to reassure Maureen, that the pupils are actually a statutory consultee as outlined in section 5.6, so the way that we will be engaging them, absolutely it's vital that we do that, and we've done so in the past, and normally that's part of Education in Scotland's involvement. They take a keen interest in making sure they take small groups of children and they talk to small groups of parents independently of us, so it gives a more holistic 360-degree review of the opinions of these people. So Maureen, absolutely spot on, and yes, we will absolutely be doing it. And thanks for the comments.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Murtagh.
Yes, I mean, just to say, I think that what both Maureen and John were saying there is absolutely spot on, and I think, as Councillor Kerr said, it is very difficult. Both Kenner Primary being within my own ward is difficult to countenance a process, and this is obviously the consultation process for closing anything in your ward. But I think what's really important is to emphasise that this is about the educational attainment and prospects for our young people, and that when we look at the audience of who was consulted with, I think that's an important point to make, that those who were consulted are those who have the children. Originally, when we were looking at the mothballing, seeking the views of those who will be most directly affected, and looking at that decision based on the educational value and health and well-being being part of that also. So I think that we did make the right decisions based on the educational merits back when we decided to mothball them, and this is obviously the evolution of that process. But yes, it's difficult from communities do get attached to buildings and to having, schools are very much at the heart of our communities, but there's little doubt in my mind that this is absolutely, for the many reasons that both John and Maureen spoke about already, an important step. And I think, as Maureen was saying, that if it could be illustrated to it's the wider community who sometimes maybe have the reservations more than necessarily the parents themselves or the children themselves, but allowing that information to flow through and explain to the wider community if there are some challenges there, I think would be very welcome, because I think if that case can be shown, then that will help us in the work that we are doing and why we are doing it, rather than being about a narrative of closures of buildings and the inevitable things that come around that aren't helpful. So I'm very grateful to the members of the committee for coming in and making those points this morning, because I think it helps when it doesn't just come from councillors and officials as well, but from others to widen that debate with our communities. So grateful for that.
Okay, thank you, Laura. If there's no other member, I'll go to Councillor McHugh if she wants to sum up on the report.
Thanks, convener. Just to say, as Councillor Murtagh's already covered, I welcome the comments from Maureen and from John, who are obviously experienced and in the know. Yeah, I get the point, that the communities and communities are affected by any service that could be withdrawn, but as has already been said, we're doing this for the right reasons with our children at the heart of the decision. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'll be happy to agree the report.
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Okay, we move on to item 7, which is Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow. And I'm looking to see, it's David Mackay is going to take this report. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. This report seeks to set out Falkirk Council's transformational change programme under the Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow. We're really excited to bring this paper to committee today, seeking approval to formally endorse the approach that we are planning to take in order that we deliver enhanced outcomes to all of our children and all of our young people across the Falkirk Council area. Section 3 outlines the background. Particularly, I think the challenges it highlights is that a significant proportion of our children and young people that are currently within our education system will be moving on to jobs that yet do not exist. And I think that's quite challenging for us even to get our heads round. But I think if we would like to reflect back over the last 20 years or so and look at the job opportunities that are now present that weren't existing then in terms of technology, the chemical industry, and more importantly, and probably specifically around digital technology, ICT, and the jobs around Facebook, etc. So that we can already see real examples over time. So if we project forward another 10 to 20 years, I think it's quite clear that there will be opportunities that we're trying to ensure that our young people are prepared for and ready for in order that they can embrace their futures. Within Falkirk, we've had a strong educational programme over the last number of years, and the papers that have been brought to committee, particularly over the last 4 years, have shown strong trend data in terms of our attainment for our young people within Falkirk, and more importantly about our destination data. It's now sitting at 95%, but we do feel that we want to break through that glass ceiling and move that on to ensure that even more of our children and young people have got opportunities of employment, but not just any job. We're looking at high paid quality jobs and careers for our children and young people. Section 3.1 Part 4 highlights the importance of level 7 qualification, which is really looking at advanced higher, college, HNC, HND, university and modern apprenticeship as a real significant milestone in learning opportunities for young people. We know that those that achieve that particular level of learning have got greater potential and opportunity to then go on and develop their careers, hopefully within the local Falkirk area. Section 3.2 looks at the destination profile over the last number of years, and it demonstrates the fact that we've had an improving trend, but it's kind of plateaued over the last number of years. So we're basically saying we now need to do something different and more innovative to ensure that we break through and allow all of our young people to progress on to the next level, and particularly around the middle 60%, because again, we feel there's great untapped potential within that cohort to further develop their skills and release their potential. So Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow looks to embrace 6 key projects in phase 1, and these are broken down in section 4.1. Broken down into investing in people in place and partnership, which again is looking to revisit and enhance the approach to community schooling, looking at the local availability of education, health, social services and community learning to ensure that we've got opportunities for these different services to work in partnership to improve the outcomes. Connected Falkirk members are aware of the previous work that was undertaken last year when it was approved to proceed, and that project's been working hard over the last several months to roll out the digital technology to our colleagues and teaching colleagues in school, and is targeting 1-to-1 devices for P6 to S6 and 1-to-5 devices for our P1s to 5. And again, it's not just about the digital technology here, it's about how this is used and how it can be used innovatively and creatively by the teaching colleagues within our schools and establishments to push forward the learning opportunities and experience of our children and people to make sure they match with their potential and support their learning, and again seeking to improve their outcomes moving forward. Section 4.4 is looking at investing in our ASN schools, and it highlights just a few of the proposals that we've currently got in stream, namely looking at extending the current Cairn Grange High School to form a 3 to 18 campus, looking to further develop the inclusion and wellbeing service to a 3 to 18 campus, looking at supporting our vulnerable children with their social and emotional needs, and also looking to enshrine the rights of other children with additional support needs to maintain their placement within mainstream schools with effective and adequate support. Section 4.5 then looks at the investment required within our primary school and highlights, and again it was discussed in some of the previous papers in terms of the profile of our learning estate is old for a significant proportion of it. We've got 31 of our schools that are currently 75 years and older. And again, we're looking to then develop those and bring them into the 21st century to ensure that the learning estate is more fit for purpose and able to deliver the curriculum for our children and young people. And again, utilising the innovative use of space that we can see being developed across the country. Section 4.6 looks at then the secondary phase and senior phase, looking to set a proposal of setting up a Falkirk Professional Academy and technical provision that then looks to bring education from schools in partnership with industry and the college to deliver bespoke programmes tailored to meet the needs of the local job market and the national job market, so that our young people's learning experiences more closely mirror that's what's needed by the employment industry moving forward thereafter. We've got very strong partnership with the college currently. We've got several programmes already in existence, and this programme then looks to drive that forward to the next level, and again looks to invest in state-of-the-art provision that will improve the pathway to ensure that the training is of high level and the state-of-the-art facilities to meet the needs of our learners going forward. And then finally in this one, it's investing in the workforce, because key to all of this is the skills and attributes of the workforce within our educational provision. And it's looking then to further develop the educational training opportunities by the development of an education training centre that would then be available for both Falkirk use, the community use, and actually the wider use around the Regional Improvement Collaborative to then deliver high quality experiences to the staff within Falkirk Council, in order that they've got the skills and attributes to then meet the needs and the demands of our young learners. Section 5 then outlines the second phase of the project, which is broken down broadly into 3 areas. And again, it's looking to reflect on what are the needs of the learners going forward. Generation Alpha is looking at the children of the millennials. So they're currently in the system. That's the children of young people born in the new millennium. They're hitting our system between 2015, so we've got some in already, to 2030. And again, they're going to be the most technologically savvy children that we've ever had in our system. So we need to make sure that both the infrastructure and the approaches within education are tailored to meet those demands and needs to ensure that they can be engaged and progress through their learning. Section 5.3 looks about the empowered curriculum, and that's again looking at to be even more innovative and building on where we already are within Falkirk in terms of our creativity and use of the curriculum to deliver positive outcomes for children and young people. But again, taking that to the next level, but how can we make best use of the time in school? How can we target the specialities within school more effectively and efficiently, and look at the structure of what we're currently delivering in order that we move on to the next level? And that will be done in very close partnership with school staff, the parents and the communities, in order that we get best value for both the primary estate and the secondary colleagues and young people. Section 5.4 then looks at the learning alliances, and that then looks to build on the investing in people, place and partnership that we've discussed in phase 1, to really then look at what are the opportunities that within the clusters, to look at the resources and the facilities that we've got within our clusters to be more efficient and more effective in the deployment of our resources, to make sure again we have the maximum impact of those within each particular cluster area, locality and Falkirk Council. Section 6 talks about the consultation. So going through this whole process, there'll be a whole series of consultations required. Some of those have already started in terms of the Council of the Future work, and they will continue to be rolled out, and further work will be having to be undertaken as we bring various initiatives forward. Each of these will be brought to committee for consideration and approval as the project goes forward, much in the same way as we have done with the early years expansion programme, so that members and the committee will be fully cited on the development as it rolls out. And again, section 7 outlines the various implications contained within the report in terms of the revenue, the capital and other areas for consideration. So again, I think in conclusion, I think this is a really innovative transformational programme within Falkirk Council. It should allow Falkirk to then push its way to be at the forefront of education delivery within Scotland, and ultimately meet the needs of our children, young people and community, to ensure that they have the best opportunities to progress on to long-term sustainable employment and opportunities, ideally within the local area. Thank you very much, Convener. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. I think this is a very exciting vision and framework, and of us for the future. And I'm sure that people will be able to get behind it, but I have no doubt there'll be questions and comments. But I'll go to Councillor McHugh to speak about the report.
Thanks, convener, and thank you very much, Mr Mackay, for the report. A fully comprehensive report on our way forward. Just to, if you can indulge me for a minute, I actually attended the Braes High Parent Council last week on the Zoom meeting, and Councillor Kerr was also there. He might want to comment as well. I was actually amazed at how our staff, our teachers, our extended staff have embraced the home learning, how they're supporting our families, our young people, our parents. It was just second to none. I was actually blown away by the things that they've put in place so quickly, and it also brings to the forefront the fact that technology and the ability to use technology to the best is very much the way forward. And this report itself comes at that very time, that very definite time that we need to recognise that to prepare our young people for the future, these things need to be put in place now. I very much see this report as the skeleton of the plan, and I really look forward to welcoming further reports as the plans that we're putting in place now start to add a bit of meat. Right now, but our children and our young people need to be very much in that competitive world that's been created, and I think it's very important that we ensure that they have all the abilities that they can grasp to go forward. I welcome also the different types of education. I think now in this generation we're recognising that not all sets of education fit. There's a lot of square pegs and there's a lot of round pegs, and I think the different abilities that young people have, and this programme will allow them to go down different routes. We've mentioned it in the past about different ways, different pathways to get to where you need to be. We need to ensure that the pathways are wide open to every child and every young person. So I welcome the support, and as Councillor Meikle-John said, it is exciting because it's our future. It's the young people, in a selfish way, the young people that are going to have to look after us when we're old and stuck at home. So we very much need to be up for that job. Well, I do anyway. Thanks very much, and thanks again, David. I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Colley.
Yeah, just very briefly, I mean, I would echo all that Adana has just said. I think, you know, it's that this work has never been so vital. You know, we're in a very difficult situation at the moment, a very challenging one for children and young people, and so the work to ensure that they have positive destinations, positive activities for the future, I think it's so important at the moment. I know that we're in a position where we're at 95% of young people in Falkirk moving on to a positive destination. I think, you know, that's very welcome. Obviously, we should always be striving, and that's the point about always striving to do better for children and young people in our area. And I think also that those positive destinations, getting into work, for example, is seen it is a positive destination, but equipping children and young people for that idea of future jobs and well-paid quality future jobs that actually improve their lives going forward, I think, as I said, has never been so vital. So I think I am slightly struggling with the idea of jobs that haven't even been created yet. So and with the fact that the millennials' children are now starting into the education system. But I think a fantastic work and very supportive, and just happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Colley. I'll open it up I've got Michael Rollo, then Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Convener, and what an exciting report. I think it's fantastic, and I think I agree with everything that's been said so far. It's visionary, it's innovative, and it's very exciting for the future of our children. So I commend you for that report. Mr. Mackay said that when you're 75 years old as a school, you're old. I'm not quite into that bracket, but when I was at school, I didn't have the best experience in education, and I'm a person of faith, and my faith actually helped me progress in education. And it's the same with children, 4 children, and 3 have got degrees, and the 4th one is pursuing one just now. So that's been a big part of my life. So I welcome this approach now that is looking at more than one size fits all, and seeking to be innovative and so creative going forward. It's really exciting. Just a couple of questions. I wondered why under 3.2.3 there are 2 columns for unemployed. I wondered what they actually refer to, what types of 2 unemployed there are. And under the additional support needs, that our percentage is 28%. I just wondered how that compared nationally. So these are my 2 questions, but very supportive, and I'm very excited about the report. And thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Well spotted there. Yeah, the actual it should say unemployed seeking and unemployed not seeking. So that's a difference between the 2. I would have to clarify which way the figures are around, and I can update you later on that one, Michael, if that's okay. In terms of the 28%, that's broadly in line with other councils across the country in terms of the percentage of ASN that we're reporting. The challenge is, though, some authorities use slightly different criteria for gathering their information, so there's quite a spread in some local authorities with the actual percentage data. But I think, with what we know for other councils, we are broadly similar to others across the country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. This is clearly the framework for a very broad and large project, which is intended to ensure that our young people can be the best that they want to be. After all, we need to make the most of whatever gifts we have, and some children will be academic and others will be arty or musical or interested in sport, and I think this is the right direction to go. And David has given us a thumbnail sketch of what is proposed, but his narrative was more enlightening, because it was put more simply. Because in 4.6, where it talks about Falkirk Technical and Professional Academy, it doesn't say whether we're talking about a building here or a concept that's going to be digital online. And similarly with investing in our workforce. So there are some aspects of it, because it is this very broad brush stroke where it isn't quite clear what's actually intended. And I found the paragraph at 5.2 at the end on Generation Alpha didn't tell me a great deal either. So I look forward to a more detailed iteration in the future, which actually tells us in simple terms what is actually intended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. I think those points are very well made. In relation to those points, you're absolutely correct, because in terms of our thinking, probably a year ago, I would be saying bricks and mortars definitely, but now with the experience that we've had over the last 12 months, I think where we are now as a team, were less certain. So I think that's a piece of work that we now have to explore more fully in terms of actually what would these proposals then look like in reality, given what we've learned over the last 12 months and what the changing needs are of the service going forward. But you're correct, we will be bringing further papers that will provide that level of detail for you and hopefully satisfy the points that you actually made more fully. Thank you.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor Nimmo, then Councillor Alexander. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener. And I have to agree, this is a very positive report. I have to think that it's the way forward for us, especially in the current situation that we find ourselves in with COVID. David, I know what you said there in relation to what Councillor Monroe was asking, but can you maybe just expand a bit more on the Education Training Centre? I'm led to believe that this is going to be a virtual facility that you're talking about taking forward. And does this include teacher training as well, just as well as the general staff? Thanks, Convener.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I mean, over the last year, we've certainly embraced online digital learning, and I know that my colleagues have embraced that opportunity as well, and we've had a much greater uptake in terms of teaching staff and non-teaching staff engaging in their ongoing professional learning within their school settings. Again, we are looking at both a kind of hybrid. We're looking to identify some physical spaces in preparation, obviously, when we come out of the lockdown and we're moving forward and hopefully return to normality. So we're exploring opportunities to identify spaces where people can come together for certain events. But you're right, we're also looking to move more online and virtually, because again, it's more accessible to colleagues. It would cut down the amount of travelling that colleagues have to do. It reduces the pressure on the end of the school day. I mean, lots of the activities tend to take place after school, but given travelling, they tend to have to wait an extra half hour or so before we can actually start. But online and digital allows that to be brought to our colleagues much sooner and more efficiently. However, we still recognise the need to bring colleagues together physically. And obviously, once we move through COVID, we still want to have that as a component part to the offer. That facility would then be available to teaching staff within Falkirk Council and others, but also the wider community going forward. But again, we're looking to identify existing spaces where possible and to consider how those can be developed to meet the needs of the service. In terms of the question regarding teacher training, we've got no plans at the present, because obviously teacher training is currently delivered by the universities. However, we work very closely with the universities in terms of our ongoing professional learning offer to newly qualified teaching staff and also student teachers. So again, we'll be looking to make sure that that was further explored and expanded to meet that ongoing need. And again, we do meet regularly with the universities to discuss the programmes and how best the work within Falkirk can articulate to that to ensure that those students get the best possible experience by coming to undertake their professional life within Falkirk Council. Thank you.
David, just on the back of that as well, at 4.7 it mentions 3,300 employees. Now, I take it from what you've just said, that doesn't include teachers then?
It does. That's a teaching staff plus the support staff. Currently, we've got about 1,700 teaching staff within the system.
Right, okay. Thanks for that. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Alexander, then Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Convener. I very much welcome the attention that's going to be paid to the 5%. But the reason that we can do that is because work that's previously undertaken, and the fact that the school leavers category have actually got down from mid-30s down to 90, down to 5%. And the credit where credit is due, the department has worked really hard to get these figures right, to get these figures down, and to get them correct. I hope that we never go back to the days when we've got double figures of kids who are not in employment, training or education, further education. it's important that we do everything we possibly can to support young people coming into the market. The facilities at Falkirk are already superb, simply because of the work that's been done by our partners within the college, and it was described as Scotland's best college prior to its refurbishment, rebuilding, and complete rebuilding and opening. So with the benefit of the new facilities, then we really should be in a position where we can really tackle this last 5% with some gusto, and see if we can get the figures even lower. There comes a time, of course, when there will be a figure left at the end of the day, and we need to make sure that we know where these people are, where these kids are, that they're not allowed to fall through the various ceilings that will be before them, and we need to make sure that they are properly monitored and properly assisted with whatever they require. So it's a tremendous support again, and again, congratulations to the staff, and also, you know, sort of those that have been involved prior to the production of this particular report, and over a number of years in terms of getting our young people into the right type of environment, whether it be training, whether it be employment, or whether it be further education. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. I've got Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to thank Mr Mackay for his comprehensive report. And as Councillor Mackay stated earlier, this committee, and I don't think it would matter what the councillors, who was on the committee, it gets supported, and rightly so, because young children are our future. If we can't get it right at this stage of their life, then it's us that's failing them. So, and leading on for what Councillor McHugh was saying about the Braes High School, very uplifting. Mr Livingston and his team and the Parent Council really have embraced the challenges that's set to them, and they've one particular thing to the S1 pupils volunteered to be IT champions, and they are helping the S1 pupils because they are that is what they're into. So they're quite happy to help their fellow peers, and as Mr Livingston says, we're no there for to look at leaks, but it's the first time 3 Falkirk schools are in the top 100, which is great for us as a council. A couple of questions for Mr Mackay. David, see when we're saying that the final destinations, how long do they leave the school until what stage do we count them as being in a position?
Thank you, Councillor. When they leave school, it's really for the first year that we track them. So it's really just giving you an indicative figure. However, we link very closely with the Educational Training Unit as well, and also the wider employability figures to then track what the kind of landscape is over Falkirk to ensure that we are supporting the young people, you know, beyond that. And I know that my school, the secondary schools, you know, do track their young people, do take an invested interest in them, and they do frequently have young people coming back to them for references and advice and guidance, even beyond that kind of window of opportunity, and they're more than happy to do so. So again, I think we've got really robust structures in place. That 5%. is a figure where we do know the young people, we know who they are, and the schools know who they are, and they're obviously endeavouring to engage with them proactively and productively. But as Councillor Alexander did say, there is a very, very small proportion of children within there because of their particular circumstances who may never actually work. But what we need to make sure is that they're adequately supported moving into adulthood. And again, that's part of another project that we're working with social work colleagues as well about transitioning. And we'll hopefully in a future meeting probably bring back some more information on that again. So it all ties in terms of the work that we're doing to ensure that we've got the best outcomes for all of our children and young people in Falkirk.
Thanks, David. And as Councillor Alexander says, it's the 5%. As you say, sometimes they are not in a position, but if we didn't try, we're failing. So thanks. And just on probably last question, on 4.6, when we spoke about the Falkirk Technology and Professional Academy, how does this differ from what we're doing at the moment? Because we have got a good programme up and running at the moment. How will that differ?
Thank you, Councillor. It's really looking to then take it to the next level. The programme we've got is it's a good programme, but it's, in terms of its reach, it's probably it's a little bit more limited than we'd like it to be. So this is really then allowing that to be expanded and offer equitably across the whole of the council, but then looking to draw in different professionals and different opportunities to make sure we've got that kind of blend of opportunities. Because again, at the moment we've got a range there, but it is limited to specific employment opportunities going forward. And again, we're looking to expand that to ensure that it more adequately reflects what's available both locally and across the central belt in terms of the job opportunities that we're trying to ensure that the skill profile of our children is tailored to meet.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I've got Councillor Reid, Councillor Bissett and John Chalmers, and then we'll go to Councillor McHugh.
Okay, thank you, Convener. It's obviously a very, very good report, very, very ambitious report and worthy of support. However, and there's always a however, when it comes to scrutiny, positive destination is, I think, a bit of a misnomer in many cases. I think there should be another column that has 0 hours contracts in it, that has international fast food companies in it, that has Uber in it, etc., etc. Because the exploitation of workers, which used to be the ironmasters in Falkirk, that full employment, like people ripping their guts out for the ironmasters, they've been replaced by international companies who equally exploit their workers. So the kid might be in a positive destination by our definition, but it's a far from positive destination. Now that's a national, indeed an international problem, but it's something we have to take into account. I know, for example, in the fast food, where one of my grandchildren is employed, it's all graduates that's working there, believe it or not. So I just wondered if the positive destination could be finessed a little bit.
Thank you, Councillor. Convener, I see Robert's got his hand up. Are you okay for Robert to step in here?
Of course, of course.
Thanks, Councillor Reid, and it's a very good point. And actually, one of the pieces of work that the team has done, and part of our thinking in terms of bringing forward what I think you'll agree is a very broad, wide-ranging suite of proposals to modernise our offer. But our analysis does show that within the figure that we have for leaving school and going into employment, that the quality of the jobs that young people are entering in many cases are not jobs that you would want to have as a pathway for a lifelong career. So if somebody's leaving school and getting a job, for example, in a fast food retail operation, they might work there for 6 months and then they might not be employed any longer. You're right, it does count people who are initially employed on 0 hours contracts. And this obviously isn't just a Falkirk issue, it's a national issue, and there is debate and discussion ongoing about that particular measure. It's a measure that succeeded what used to be referred to as not in employment, education or training. So positive destinations does include more categories than previously. However, what I would hope that we will be able to do in the coming years is be bringing back more nuanced reports to committee to say, of those leaving school, this many went to university, this many went to college, this many started apprenticeships, this many started work of value that was going to lead to career progression, and also here are those that entered essentially low value jobs that might not be sustainable in the long term. So as we gather more information and more data, then I would certainly be aspiring to be bringing you that. While I've got my mic off, if I could just add another couple of things about the opportunity that we have in front of us in terms of the Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow project. I think reference was made earlier in the committee to the fact that we've got a number of schools that are over 75 years old. I think maybe reference has been made to Victorian schooling models. And what we're looking at here is grasping the opportunity in some ways that COVID fortuitously has presented us with. We have accelerated into online and digital learning over the course of the last year. The Council has supported the Connected Falkirk rollout. We have in the past, and David's already mentioned this, we've got a tremendous relationship with Forth Valley College. We've been doing a lot of foundation and modern apprenticeships. There are more learning pathways being developed that support children that are not necessarily suited to a fully school-based curriculum. The other thing that I see as an opportunity is because of what happened with the Scottish Qualifications Authority and the fact that we're currently looking at different ways of certificating and recognising achievement, what that means when we start talking to parents about what the pathways might be for their children, some of the previous reluctance to not be in school picking 5 hires begins to go away. So when we start talking about a technical and professional academy, if we're able to be talking to parents and young people about doing professional qualifications, industry standard professional qualifications, as part of a suite of learning and certifications where they might do an HNC plus a couple of hires, or they might be moving towards an HND plus a couple of hires, then we begin to get a really quite rich tapestry of educational offer and journey into employment offer through the various things that David set out. So I would just like to say, from my point of view, thank you to the committee for all the words of encouragement and support that you've made thus far. But I see this as us being on a cusp of doing something really innovative, really creative, and ultimately something that I think collectively we can be proud of 3-4 years down the line in terms of the achievements that we make for our children and young people. Thanks for your indulgence, Convener.
I agree with everything that Robert said, but it really stirs me. I need to get it off my chest when I see kids being exploited. It's still going on.
I don't disagree with your sentiments there, Councillor Reid, and it is something that we need to try and address in the bigger picture, but we have a part to play in that, absolutely. Okay, I've got Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I just wanted to say that I welcome this report. It's a really positive report, and sometimes when you reach certain heights, you try to go to the next stage, and it's very, very difficult, and you just wonder how you're going to get there. And sometimes you need a quantum leap. And if what's outlined in this report is managed properly, I think this could be the quantum leap we need to go to the next stage. I certainly welcome the Falkirk Technical and Professional Academy. That is, in this day and age, this is exactly what's needed. And the Connected Falkirk, we had a presentation last year, I think it was, and I was really impressed by what can be achieved. You know, teachers can mark an essay and send it back to the pupil and with comments, and just immediately they can make changes, send it back and forth. So I think it was more than welcome. And I did notice that 5.2, it says Generation Alpha. I just wondered if this was an allusion to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And I think that's probably very apt, that we do stand on the brink of remarkable change. And so whoever's put that in the report may be thinking along the same lines as me. I think that we do need this change to come about. And I just wanted to say, is a lot of what we're trying to achieve here predicated on a bid to go into the capital programme? And is it indeed the case that any bid in the capital programme for Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow is match funded by the Scottish Government? And I'd just also like to ask if all the children who need digital equipment now have that digital equipment. But I'm more than welcome this, as I think it's the change we need, and if it's managed properly, I think we could see great results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bissett. In relation to the Connected Falkirk and the rollout of that, my colleagues are currently preparing a briefing for members to give an update on where we've currently got to within the rollout of Connected Falkirk. Where we currently are, all the teaching staff currently have their devices now, so they're ready to engage in that. The rollout of the vulnerable children's devices is almost complete, and the team are currently working on the rollout then to the wider school population. And again, some of the challenges we've had, as you would expect during COVID, has been actually the supply of devices. It's not our aspiration or readiness to deliver, but obviously has had some challenge with that. But obviously that will form part of a briefing that members can attend in the not too distant future. And I know that we're currently preparing that for colleagues. For our colleagues are currently preparing that for members. In relation to the capital bid, you're correct. There are monies available from the Scottish Government to match fund capital money from the local authority, and we've currently been working with finance, and Gary has been very helpful to me and my team in terms of reprofiling the kind of bids that we need to submit, given in the current situation within the council. So we're working closely with that to ensure that the ambition of this project is realised with the capital programme over the next several years to deliver that for us. But again, that will form part of those papers that will flow from this in subsequent months.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. John.
Hi, just to reiterate, a lot of the points have already sort of been made, but it's just to say that within schools you've got a lot of teachers who, since the last lockdown and this lockdown, their technology skills have been improved 1,000 times almost. And the investment obviously in that and in taking it forward to move forward education within your children is really valued. But it's just to ensure that the investment in the teacher training for the online resources and things like that is going to continue as well. It's okay putting out all these devices and things like that, but if we don't get the training to take that on, and I know there is a lot of training going on with Malcolm Wilson and other ones round about that. However, it's really important that we keep pushing that forward and moving our classrooms into the 20th century. We're well into it now, but obviously keep moving forward so that our children and the kids in our classrooms keep moving, getting ready for the future, because I don't know what some of my primary school kids, what their jobs are going to be, as was already mentioned. So if we don't future-proof them at the moment, and to do that, we need to actually future-proof the teachers to deliver that, to take that forward. So it's just saying, obviously your teachers are some of your biggest resources in the classroom, and it's making sure that they are actually properly trained and up to date with all the recent things going forward. So it's just to add that to it.
Thank you, John. I think that's a very valid point, and actually I would probably say it's the most important point, because actually the physical devices are just the tools. And and if you've got an iPad or you've got the digital device and you don't know how to use it, it's useless. It's meaningless to both the young person and the teaching staff and the school staff. So actually, it's the actual training and the engagement that underpins the effectiveness of it going forward. And obviously, Stuart Lenny, who's leading the project for me, is very well aware of that and is actually putting the training at the fore of everything that we actually do, because unless all of the staff are fully conversant with all of the tools that they've got at their disposal using the digital devices, then we'll fall far short of where we'd like to be. So I'm confident that through the work that we'll roll out, but probably more importantly through an ongoing dialogue with colleagues in school to understand what their challenges are, what their needs are, we will then be able to tailor the offer to meet that, so that we can then take it to the next level and that we actually realise all the benefits that the devices will then bring.
Okay, thank you, David. I'll go back to Councillor McHugh to sum up.
Thanks, Cecil. Just to highlight again, where Councillor Kerr mentioned the first year pupils and the fact that we've got peers in there, and going on what John was saying and David there about obviously having the equipment but maybe not having the way for all to work that equipment. I think our young people have shown us, certainly I couldn't work half the stuff that I work if it wasn't for the young people in my household showing me, and sometimes they're not very patient with me actually, so maybe it's patience we need to be focusing on to teach them, but certainly getting our young people involved in teaching their peers, supporting their peers and supporting their teachers and their families is fantastic, because as we've said already, they're our next generations. They're the ones that are going to be more technology savvy than any of us ever will be. So supporting our young people to encourage them to put they put on little YouTube videos to help each other, sometimes pictorials and things like that are far better than reading a manual. So all that stuff is happening, and yes, I agree with David and John that really needs to move forward, that we need to support any of our employees with anything we can, so as we can maximise on their abilities to teach our children. So thank you for the report, and that's all. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. We happy to agree with the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We move on to item 8, which is a National Improvement Framework and Education Plan. And back with David. Thank you, David.
Thank you, convener. This report seeks to bring forward the next iteration of a National Improvement Framework Plan. It builds upon the Standards and Quality Report, which we tabled at the last executive meeting, which was outlining the progress that we had made towards realising our ambition from the previous year. So this plan really looks to take stock in what is probably one of our most unusual years. But I'm pleased to report that actually, despite the various challenges that we've all been facing over the last several months, my schools and senior officers in education and across children's services have still driven forward the improvement agenda, not necessarily to the end point that we had hoped for last year, but had made significant progress. So this report sets out to highlight the work that's been undertaken over the past year, and really then seeks to refocus our ambition going forward. And it links into what I was talking about previously through the Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow, about the drive to improve outcomes for children and young people, improve attainment, particularly around literacy and numeracy, look to close the attainment gap, and focusing on children's mental health and well-being, and also improving employability skills. The plan then seeks to categorise that into 4 key areas. So we're looking at leadership and support development. We're then looking at raising attainment and achievement. They're looking at well-being, inclusion and equality, and finally skills and attributes development. And the plan contained in Appendix 1 then summarises the work that's happened over the past year, and it seeks to rank them red, amber, green, and provides statements in terms of the progress that has been made. And again, it shows that there's been significant progress made over the last year. However, we are seeking to further improve our position within Falkirk schools. So then the plan goes on to then explain what we are proposing to do in the coming year. And it lays out quite a comprehensive plan of work for both the schools, early learning settings, nurseries, primary, secondary schools, and the senior officers in the central teams over the coming year. And we'll be looking to bring forward a report towards the tail end of this year in form of a standards and quality report that will summarise the progress that we have achieved in delivering this plan. So what I'm looking for is approval for the content of the plan that's on the table today, and obviously we will then bring subsequent plans towards the end of this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener, and thank David for this full, very comprehensive report with a lot of detail in it. I think we have to recognise that within our children's services, every report that we bring forward should fit hand in hand, and they do. You can see a line running right through everything that we do, and our National Improvement Framework highlights that any of the plans from the last report and from their early learning report says that we're on the road and we're not going off in tangents. We've got a plan in place and we're moving forward and we're drawing everyone with us. I think you can see from the National Improvement Framework that we're focusing on our staff. Obviously, they're the cohort that we need to invest in very much so to get it right for our young people and our children. And there's a lot of focus there on staff needs, recognition of training and putting that training in place. And when I've discussed this report with David, that was one of the things that I was keen to know, that training is still going ahead, albeit online. But yeah, we're pushing forward with the training, and we're pushing forward with supporting our staff, and that's very much the key to getting things right for our children and for our families. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that's going, and the hurdles that we're meeting. We're not getting blocked by them. We're looking at ways to get over those hurdles. I love the idea that our senior staff have a breakfast groups where they can support each other, and I think that now more than any time we're recognising that the peer groups within our service need to support each other, because they're the ones that know what the pressures are and who can support them within that. And I think that's very important as well. So I reckon I welcome the report. And a little bird has just smacked off my window. For me thing. It's probably my window box at this moment in time. Gosh, this home learning's great, isn't it? Anyway, thank you for the report, David, and I welcome the movements forward. I move the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I'm happy to second the report. I think it's very easy under the current climate to allow the focus on continuous improvement to slip with all the other challenges that have been going on. So it's commendable that that hasn't been allowed to happen, and that we have seen progress. And there is a commitment and a plan there to focus on continuous and sustained improvement going forward. So I do commend the staff for pulling this together and producing the evidence to support it, and looking at the next iteration to see us continue to push the boundaries going forward. I'll now open it up for any members' questions or comments. No. Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, thanks, convener. David, question in relation to 6.1, that's the financial aspects. It's on page 66 of the agenda. Now, obviously, the equity fund and allocation is ring-fence money, and it's allocated to head teachers to try and improve the attainment gap. I've got concerns, obviously. It might not be so much of an issue in smaller schools, but when it comes to our secondary schools, our big, large schools, how are head teachers going to be able to justify the impact of this additional funding? because it seems to me that in the big schools it'll just be swallowed up, and it'll be really difficult, if not impossible, for the head teachers to justify any impact. Thanks, convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor. No, it's a very valid point, and it is a challenge. However, back when we first got our People Equity Fund notification, we were very clear at that time that we set out very clear parameters in terms of each school understanding itself and looking at its own data, rigorously analysing that data, and based on their findings locally, then looking to decide how they would approach the particular challenges within their school about raising attainment for all and closing the inequalities within the poverty-related attainment gap that were facing them. Through those processes, the schools work very closely with their leadership teams within the school, but also linking to central teams as well, to ensure that they had robust monitoring and tracking systems in place for the specific pieces of work that they were endeavouring to undertake in that time. Many of those began to realise some positive impacts. Equally, some, it was quite clear from the start that they were not having the impact that was required, and schools quite quickly just stopped that activity and moved on to other activity, which again showed they were nimble and agile and able to respond to the changing needs locally with their young people. And they've been monitoring and tracking that over the last number of years now. But you're correct, there's a number of projects running in parallel, so it's an accumulation of the impact of all of the various approaches within the People Equity Fund within the schools, the learning and teaching approaches within the schools, which again was probably re-energised and stimulated by the People Equity Fund agenda, and also their ongoing attainment agenda within the schools, and that's beginning now to realise positive impact on the outcomes for children and young people, and a measurable closing of the gap. But again, the specifics are quite difficult to disentangle, but we do have evidence to support whether particular interventions are having an impact, and then the totality of that will then be realised when we do the school leaver returns in terms of what is the basket of qualifications and experiences that our children and young people attain over the period of time within school. And again, the last 4 years we've seen year-on-year improvement with that regard, and hopefully that will continue into the future. Councillor, you're on mute.
Sorry, first time this morning, or this afternoon now, I should say. I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Can you come back to me, convener? Thanks.
I'll allow you a minute or two to think about it. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, convener. And I think you know, we all have our senior moments at times, and part of one of the things that I've obviously had to learn throughout the process of being a parent is just how continuously out of touch I'm reminded that I am by my children, and I'm very conscious when we come to committees and having listened to the last report that things which we you know might think are right now at the cutting edge. In fact, if I was to say them out loud, my children would cringe in embarrassment to tell me that in fact I was vastly mistaken, and that was completely old technology that they would consider that only old people would use. So I think that the point I'm making is that although we look at in the last report, the Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow, this report in terms of the focus on continuous improvement, the National Improvement Framework, and as we often talk about, the growth mindset that we need to have within all of our work, but particularly within education, because time doesn't stand still, learning doesn't stand still, technology does not stand still, and I think that this report and the detail within it, but the ethos within it is very, very important in showing that, you know, we have that mindset of continuous improvement, and that's what's driving forward the way that we look at the educational aspects for our young people. One thing I do just want to highlight, because I think perhaps it's not often spoken about, is that you know, the learning, and now more than ever we see the partnership that learning is between teachers themselves delivering the learning, those who are supporting those teachers and giving the training, which is crucial, our young people giving feedback, but also the parents who are partners in learning. And I think I was looking back at my own communication from the high school, which one of my children goes to, which is a very, very large high school, and yet despite that, finding how well the teachers and the staff, the management staff, know each child and are able to respond to those concerns, any concerns that are raised, but also the offer of continual family learning, the identification of where family learning needs to take place and how parents can be supported in their own learning, but also in helping to support their children, whether that's, I think, one of the courses that was offered about how to motivate your child, for your teenager from being bored, was particular interest to me. But also there are courses and evenings that are offered to parents on things like, you know, helping with mental health aspects and motivating their children, but also on the kind of curricular, whether it's, you know, in depth into maths, in depth into literacy, these things that are targeted to parents to be able to help their children, and that's maybe not known to the wider community if they're not involved in that. But I find that, even as somebody who would hold myself to be privileged to be able to help my children in many aspects of their learning, still absolutely invaluable, and it fits into the National Improvement Framework and, you know, the quality standards and quality reports that we focus on not being complacent about, although we have made great improvements in recent years and things continue on the right trajectory, that we don't stand still. And as was said in the opening report, even throughout the pandemic, we have managed to continue to focus on that because we understand the importance of not standing still. So I will thank the convener and just say for not patching me, just so I can embarrass my children as use of my street cred lingo, and leave it at that, and promise never to mention any of those terms ever again to them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Murtagh. At some point you will get your own back on your children, and you'll be able to say anything you like to embarrass them.
I like very much telling them to make me tea during committee. That I find is part of their health and wellbeing curriculum, absolutely essential to me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nim, have you remembered?
Yeah, it's came flooding back to me now, convener. Just on the back of what David was saying, I'm curious as to what information head teachers have to provide the Scottish Government with in relation to the PEF funding. It's maybe formed part of a previous report. If so, I was just wondering if the information could be sent out again to members. That's it, convener.
Thank you, Councillor. We're currently engaged with scrutiny in terms of People Equity Fund, so there is a report being tabled this week for Scrutiny Committee in terms of our processes behind that. And again, I'm happy to consider a report at a future date if we can agree that in relation to People Equity Fund and where we currently are within Falkirk Council, and obviously within that report be able to highlight some of the streams of data that the schools are accessing to obviously form their understanding of the progress of their children and young people in their schools, and then obviously subsequently inform their planning thereafter.
Thanks, David. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Nimmer. Of course, there may well be something comes from the scrutiny that will come back to the executive in due course anyway, and we can maybe allow a bit more information to be able to supplement that report. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, convener. We have a lot of information here about improving attainment, particularly in literacy and numeracy, and other areas of improvement are also outlined. And so we have all these aspirations and goals, but we don't have any information on the measures or the extent to which any improvement has actually taken place. And, you know, if we're going to have goals, we need outcomes that we can see. Are these going to be brought to us at some future date, or what is intended? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Robert, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, just to say that reporting on progress, and in particular the outcomes of around attainment data, come to the committee. So we had a report the other side of Christmas on the SQA attainment, and we have a report usually in March in terms of the overall attainment that comes following the analysis, not just of SQA attainment, but all other learning. So there's 2 points in the year where attainment outcomes, closing of the gap, is reported to committee. And from memory, the report that would have been presented to the last March committee was appended to our report in September. So ordinarily, we've got a September report that's about the exam diet, and then we've got an overall report that comes to the committee in March, which details not just all of the secondary attainment data, but also the data that is now collected and submitted to government for primary attainment. So that's where you would see that information, whereas the report in front of us today is really about a plan and a commentary on the progress with the plan. So there is information relating to the data, but the way that this committee's been set up, our cycle reports that in a different way and at a different time. I don't know if David wants to add anything to that.
Thanks, Robert. That was the point I was going to make as well. Thank you, Robert.
Would it not be better if these things were linked? I mean, you're looking for all these additional things, but do we think we've got a 1% improvement, a 2% improvement? I mean, as it's presented, it's very abstract because the outcomes are somewhere entirely separate.
Thank you, Councillor. What I'll do is I'll take that off table and speak to my colleagues.
I also think, from my memory, because I know that this has been raised before, that sometimes the need to report to government doesn't actually fit in with the other cycles around the outcomes of the exam diet and other reporting. So I think it's almost a timing issue that we have, because I know that this is something that has been raised before, and I'm sure others will remember comments along those lines as well. Okay, is there any other member? No, Councillor McHugh, do you want to sum up? No. Okay, happy to.
Nothing else to add. Thanks, Cecil.
Okay. Okay. Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. We come to our final item, which is the non-educational functions. It's in relation to residential childcare provision, and Sarah Lacey is going to take this report.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon to everybody. Please give me 1 second because my report has disappeared from my screen. So, thank you, Convener. This report provides a brief overview of current children's residential service provision in Falkirk and asks the Education, Children and Young People Executive to agree to realign overtime and sessional staff costs to establish an annual budget which supports the creation of 6 full-time equivalent residential posts, and to note the proposed variation of Care Inspectorate registration of Wallace Crescent Children's House to support local long-term care provision for young people. The background section of this report provides brief detail about Falkirk's 2 children's houses. It notes at 3.3 that Wallace Crescent was established in 2010 as a short-term assessment care provision where children are accommodated from family or foster care placements for up to 12 weeks before either being supported to return home or move to a longer-term care option. Paragraph 3.4 notes that many young people continue to be placed at some distance from Falkirk, and this impacts on their outcomes and has cost implications. Since both of our children's houses opened, each house has had a shortfall of 3 FTE staff to cover annual leave and to allow the managers of those homes to work patched from the rota. The has recently made recommendations that managers should be freed from being part of the rota to enable them to fully undertake their management.
We appear to have lost Sarah. Oh, Sarah, we lost you for a little minute.
Oh.
You just finished in relation to 3.7, if that helps.
That does help, indeed it does. I'm on 3.9. Thank you, Convener. The shortfall of dedicated staff to cover annual leave and staff absence leads to both a reliance on casual staff, which impacts on consistency of care for young people, and places demands on staff to work overtime, impacting staff fatigue, well-being and quality of care. Considerations set out in section 4 highlight that one of the aspects of the promise is that young people should not need to move frequently when they are in our care. The proposal to change the model of care from short to long term at Wallace Crescent and to invest in sufficient permanent staff for both houses supports these important elements of the promise. A specific Closer to Home project entitled Young People at the Centre of Residential Care is managing the implementation of the proposed changes that are laid out in this report. Formal consultation with residential staff, managers and trade unions is planned over the first 5 months of 2021. The scope of the consultation includes any changes in work patterns for staff and the proposed variation to the Care Inspectorate registration for Wallace Crescent. Section 6 outlines the financial implications of the proposal. The use of overtime and sessional employees to ensure required care and support within our residential houses has existed as an overspend without identified budget for years, and the creation of a budget to be offset against annual spending on sessional staff is proposed to enable the appointment of 6 FTE staff. There are no legal risks to the Council within these proposals, and in the Equalities section at 6.5 it's stated that these proposals will increase access to safe, nurturing care within the local area and allows ongoing access to local education and other resources and amenities. I'll refer Executive to recommendations at section 2, and I'm happy, Convener, to take questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll go to Councillor Colley.
I'm obviously I'm supporting this paper. I'm led in the decision to support it by the voices of children and young people in the independent care review, that we should seek to limit the number of placement moves for young people and enable them to build and sustain positive long-term relationship. To be clear, it's not a question of staff not currently providing excellent care and excellent support to children and young people, and indeed both Wallace Crescent and Tremanagh have, as you know, had positive inspections. But rather, this is a move to make change on the basis of thousands of children and young people who spoke to the care review, sharing their experiences and views of what needs to change, including many children and young people from Falkirk. Equally, it aligns with Closer to Home, a move that I know members have been supportive of, ensuring that children and young people can be provided with local residential support where it is needed, closer to their homes and to the wider network of family and friends to maintain important connections and relationships. This proposal to move the model of care from short to long term at Wallace Crescent responds to these views from young people, alongside investing in staff for both houses, ensuring there are good levels of staffing and time allowed for management to ensure that young people can build those positive, trusting relationships. I think in closing, I would say that I would note that the care review talks at length about the important and vital role of the workforce. And I see this move as well as supporting children and young people more effectively as building on that important and vital role and giving them the resources that they need as well. So I'd like to propose the report.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do right now. We need to support the staff, but we also need to take into account the needs of the children, which is paramount in all of this. And the changes that are proposed take into account all of that. So I'm happy to second the report, and I will open up for any comments or questions. I've got Councillor Harris and Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I'm very much in favour of the sentiment of this report and in no way would seek to detract from it. However, I just wanted to clarify on the financial implications. The way that I read it is that, and it states in the paper that the current payments to make up the shortfall are reported as an overspend because they're not in the budget. So realigning that into a budgetary item, am I correct in assuming that this reflects an uplift in the revenue costs of just over £250,000?
Yes, Councillor, that would be correct. This is a sustained legacy position where the budget matches the current staffing resource that has been identified for the provision of the service, but the current structure relies upon overtime and also the use of casual staff, which isn't budgeted for. So the spend has been a legacy position that's required around the operational running of the two houses, but not built into the revenue budget, which would allow us to go ahead and create the additional 6 FTE posts to help stabilise the running of the service.
Okay, thanks. So just to be clear, if we approve this report, which I'm sure we will, but it does reflect an uplift of the revenue in the revenue account.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah.
But it has been a legacy for many years, and it's almost a realignment of the budget, and therefore taking some of the pressures off the service. I believe, and because it has been relying on overtime, etc. And it's something that I'm sure Mr. Smale will be quite happy to see actually happen, because it has been a continued overspend, and that's not something we should be having, particularly in such a service as this. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. We agree with the recommendations. I think this needed to happen, and it provides a level of continuity with staff, whereby kids might be no like the it's easy for me to say, but they might not like different staff coming in at different times and they're not familiar with them. So that kind of a stable platform where staff are there on a full-time basis is to be welcomed. So nothing else to say in that apart from it was the right move to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. Maureen.
Thank you for that report, Sarah. From my background, I know that attachment is a huge issue for a lot of these children who are in care, and the fact that concerns me is the differences in staff. Depending on if somebody's off one day, they could have a person coming in, and the next day it could be somebody different. I think in the best interest of these children that staff should be regular, that managers should have time away to see the bigger picture. Your natural instinct, if a teacher's off to go in and all hands are on deck, but then it's not part of the big plan. You're in there as a body looking after these people. I feel quite strongly about this. There's been a lot of research and stuff done on, and if anybody's interested, a lady called Louise Bomber, Bomber, talks about attachment issues with children and how that sets them up for a very hard struggle in school. And depending on you know, all the different things we've discussed today with the early years and the trying to get, and apologies to Councillor Bissett, it was Councillor Kerr that didn't like the big acronyms. You know, if I talk about STET, you know, all these different things. So if children are succeeding today, they're going to be, let me get it right, they're going to excel tomorrow. And I think this is one aspect of pupils who need all the help they can get. I mean, I'm totally for that, you know. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Maureen. Councillor Kerr. James, yeah, Councillor Kerr.
You broke up when you were talking there, convener. Thanks, convener. Very much so support this report. And thanks, Sarah, for bringing it forward. I'm very well aware of the two houses that we've got, and in the long run, it could, putting it into the revenue budget could save us money that we're not paying overtime instead of having it in the revenue budget. But for me, if it costs us a bit more, it costs a bit more. Having the service is the most vital part for these children. And as Councillor Colley mentioned earlier on, the closer to home thing is something that we're trying to achieve in a lot of different aspects of our social care, and this being a small part of it will benefit not just the us as the provider, but as the children as being in these homes. So very much thank Sarah for the report. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I've got Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener. Can I just start off by saying that I support the report and the additional staff as well. They'll obviously be welcome. Just a question for Sarah, and it's just to provide myself with some further information regarding the two centres that we operate here in Falkirk. What is the difference between the type of care that's provided in these two centres as opposed to short-term fostering? Can I get an answer to that? Thanks, convener.
Okay, Sarah.
Thanks, convener. The difference from fostering is that fostering takes place in a family home, in a family setting, with a single foster carer or a couple who are registered foster carers. Within a residential care setting, often these settings are required, Councillor Nimmo, specifically when there are particular matching implications, which mean that fostering isn't the right kind of provision for a child or brothers and sisters within a family group setting. So residential care is a really important part of care provision for children and young people. We would very much, as you know, through closer to home objectives, want to grow our own population of Falkirk foster carers. We are really eagerly working to recruit far more foster carers so that we have far more family-based options for children and young people. But residential care is still very much required. It's still a really good quality offer for many children and young people. It's absolutely the right offer for them. We have high expectations of what's provided through residential, and you know, over all of the years I've worked with young people, for some it is the option that they want over other options. Foster care can be just the most fantastic option for many young people, but for others, living in a family setting is very, very challenging given what their early years experiences have been like and perhaps their ongoing contact with their own biological parents. So the residential setting sits as an important component part, and I don't ever see us not having a need for it, but we would certainly really want to reduce our reliance on external provision and even love to see our own provision be more streamlined and not as required as it currently is. But certainly for the medium term, the provision that we have is very much required and certainly adds a lot to a young person's experiences. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Sarah. Thank you. Thanks, convener.
Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you, convener. I think this morning there's been many references to the way councillors unite when it comes to children, especially in this committee. And if I may relate an anecdote regarding Wallace Crescent, I was present at the public meeting in consultation for this move, and it was fairly vitriolic, to be honest. I often draw the comparison with being in Alabama during the segregation period. And it would have been easy for, I think, the members of your party who were in opposition at the time to make cheap political capital out of it. But all credit to Councillors Jackson and Councillor Hughes, I think, who did not take that opportunity, but stood by the officers' recommendations. It was a very encouraging and united effort on the part of councillors, which I reflect on quite a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I think it was a very contentious at the time application, but I think the community was one round, and I think it helped to have the leadership of the local members involved in that, and not have the politics become the focus, but the facilities and the good work. And I think we have to reflect on the fact that both facilities have had consistently good feedback from the inspectorate as well. Maureen, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I just wanted to ask Sarah, the children who are in, or the young people who are in Tremanna and Wallace Crescent, do they attend schools in Falkirk? And if other young people are housed elsewhere, like outside of Falkirk Council, what schools do they attend? Is it still Falkirk schools, or is it a school nearer their home?
Convener,
Yes, Sarah.
I'm happy to pick that question up from Maureen. Yeah, Maureen, as you would expect, these young people are subject to pretty extensive care planning activities.
Yep.
So it really is that, real team around the child approach to what is right in terms of the makeup of the care provision for that child or young person. So absolutely, we know the vast majority of children and young people who have to be accommodated away from home will want as much connection with their local area as possible. And that's an absolute bedrock of closer to home, because again, a legacy position for Falkirk has been overuse of external provision, whether it be foster care or residential care. So the whole closer to home strategy is really about turning that around to make sure that we have adequate provision to be able to support children and young people to be able to keep their friendships, keep contact with family, attend their local schools, attend their local GP practice. So if you're accommodated anywhere near Falkirk, whether it's in Falkirk provision or just outside provision, we do our level best to make sure that all of those contacts are sustained. But there becomes a point where sustaining those local contacts have impacts that are not so positive in a child or young person. So having a small child or even an older child in a taxi or somebody's car travelling for hours per day on a motorway to get them back to Larbert High or Falkirk High, for example, there comes a point where that makes little sense, and you want a young person's, perhaps their longer term placement is now further away from Falkirk, and you want them to support them to have those networks locally to where they are placed. So all of these things are really complex.
Yeah,
We also know from our own longer term understanding of young people's requirements is that ultimately placed far away from home, still a vast majority of our young people want back to Falkirk at some stage. So they may have lived for years, for example, in Fife, and many will want to come back to Falkirk. So keeping those connections are a real strong driver. And obviously with closer to home, it's about those community-based and family-based asset approaches that will help us prevent as many young people and children ending up being accommodating and facing these challenges. We want to safely make sure that we're wrapping around preventative home-based strategies. So that's a big focus and a big investment of closer to home. And while I have the opportunity, I really just wanted to offer some assurance on the points, Maureen, that you were really curious about earlier. The sessional and the casual staff that we do rely on currently within residential houses, they are our staff. We safely recruit them and we make sure that they're trained to a high standard. But your points are well made around consistency of staffing, etc.
Yeah.
Just wanted to add that while I could. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll go to Councillor Colley if she wants to sum up.
No, that's fine.
Okay, are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this morning's committee. Can I thank everybody for their attendance?